Alright, hello, we're on PTR, and I'm going to be doing my point 2 guide for Frost. So this is the intro. I am going to just cover everything in this video because I think it's reasonable that some people might want to play Spellslinger, Frostfire, or the Frostfire Frostbolt spam build, because they're all, really close to each other. So this is going to be a long one. Skip to the sections where you want to watch because I'll have them timestamp below, but my recommendation in general is probably going to be to primarily play the standard Frostfire build for everything. It's essentially equal to Spellslinger in a sim setting, and Spellslinger has a lot of realistic loss in game. However, if you want to play no GS or no Death Chill, Spellslinger is a much better option for Mythic Plus. But yeah, a lot of options for Frost this tier, so let's get into it. So this is what our raid build is going to look like. Pretty standard. I mean, for single target, in cleave. If you ever do end up wanting, to get freezing winds, you just go ahead and drop chain reaction and slick ice, and then take cold snap. And so you'll be playing this on probably a couple bosses, but most likely when you actually do this change, you're going to end up wanting to just play the Myth Plus build, which we'll talk about in a second. So pretty simple, nothing too crazy. Yeah, no changes. And then we have our notepad for our single target priority. And I have a no GS prio because I'm just going to be giving you a no GS Mythic Plus build for Spellslinger. But this is, the standard single target priority that you would do for like Mythic Plus and whatnot, right? You have your normal opener, but you have Frostbolt Flurry into an Icy Veins, and then you just like Frozen Orb and start Ice Lancing and stuff. So nothing crazy. But yeah, so we have Flurrying either after Glacial Spike or after Frostbolt. Unlike in previous tiers, we actually do not want to overcap Icicles to Flurry after Frostbolt. You're gonna just save that and go. If you're going from 4 into 5 Icicles from Frostbolt, you would then do a Glacial Spike into Flurry. Right? Makes sense. Pretty common. Second, you're just going to toss out Frozen Orb. We got a lot of consistent CDR from Spellslinger and everything on Frozen Orb, so we're just going to throw it out whenever. So shifting power, all we really care about is if you have less than 2 flurry charges. That does not mean that you'll shifting power right here after the opener, because technically here in the opener you're still at 2 flurry charges. So you need like, a bunch of Ice Lances and a Glacial Spike, whatever, and then you'll end up shifting powering there. But that's right. Glacial Spike, we're still only using it if we can shatter it. So again, if you have Flurry up as a cooldown, you can Glacial Spike into Flurry. Otherwise, if Winter Shell's already on the target, you can send a Glacial Spike. And then I just listed this for Mythic Plus, but if you have Blizzard talents, you should use Blizzard in single target, but you do only want to do it out of Icy Veins, and then you'll just use it with the instant Blizzard procs. Relatively intuitive. And then Ice Lance, just send that with Fingered Frost from Where's Chill, and lastly you have Frostbolt. So not a lot going on for sure. Comet Storm not included, even though it is talented, so you can just kind of hold that for in cleave if you want. Or if you really want to use it, you can use it into Winter's Chill outside of Icy Veins, but it's not necessary. So, good. For no GS, it gets a little bit simpler, right? We're only ever flurrying after Frostbolt. You're going to send Frozen Orb CD, you're going to do the Comet Storm thing I just said, but you actually need to do it. And then, you're going to shifting power less than 2 flurry charges, and then the same for everything else, right? A little bit simpler, just no GS. But you will not be playing this in raid. 0 chance you play this in raid. It's a like minus 6% single target at the least. So this is only for like Mythic Plus single target. Okay, so let's get into a gameplay example for that. And then it's worth noting, right, our tier set is this, where you just get 10% increased Ice Lance and Icicle damage, which does apply to Glacial Spike, and Ice Lance has a 50% chance to generate 1 stack of Cold Front. Direct Splinter damage is a 15% chance to grant a stack of Cold Front as well, and then when Frozen Orb deals damage to enemies, it has a chance to give Cold Front, and then whenever you summon the Cold Front Orb, it gives you 8% spell power. So overall, nothing really you're going to be paying too much attention to. You just want to have somewhere tracking Cold Front, because if you're not aware, Cold Front is just after you cast 30 of your Frostbolts or Flurries, you send out a Frozen Orb that shoots out at you like a normal Frozen Orb. So you do need to be facing the target, and you're going to, like, positioning is going to be relatively important for it, especially on something like this target dummy, which is has a very small hitbox, so my Frozen Orb might not even hit it for its full duration because it's a poorly designed spell. But yeah, and it does require you to actually send a Frostbolt or send a Flurry to send the Frozen Orb, unlike Fire, where the one that procs it sends the Meteor. For us, we need an additional one after that. So for single target, that's not something we're really concerned about. But for AoE, you will be concerned about making sure that you are sending that proc as soon as you get it by using Flurry or Frostbolt. And yeah, because you cannot get additional stacks while you have the ready buff. Anyway, on to the priority. So you just have the standard opener, right? We're ignoring Comet Storm because we're playing Spellslinger. And you're just playing base Frost. Pretty chill. Sneak that shifting power in. That orb just came up. You really want to make sure that you're paying quite a lot of attention to that. Especially now that Spellfrost Teachings is consistent CDR. So you can see, made sure to orb before my Glacial Spike, just so I'm not wasting that CDR. I do get relatively lucky with flurries here on this opener. Quite a lot of Glacial Spikes with no delay, which is nice. It might be good if you remove Comet Storm from your bars as Spellslinger. Because for me, right, it's right next to my Frozen Orb, and so looking down at it really just makes me want to press it, and I should not. Now for Frostfire, we'll do a little look at Sims, though I imagine these numbers might change whenever you see this. There might be more tuning and stuff, but currently Frostfire is a little bit behind Spellslinger and Sims. I would anticipate that due to its consistency and just the way that Spellslinger works, where it has a lot of realistic loss in game. You take a look at a fight like Forge Master next tier, where your splinters can just go ahead and like hit the 99% damage reduced mobs. Spellslinger probably not going to be played just because Frostfire has so much less variance and it sims a little bit more accurate, really. And there's two builds for Frostfire for single target, and only one of these applies to Mythic Plus. You will not be playing a Frostbolt build in Mythic Plus, okay? But in Raid, you do have the option to play this, Boltspam Frostfire Bolt build, which is a little bit better than Spellslinger, and about 2% better than the standard Frostfire build. Normally there's a lot of hubbub or whatever about this. I would consider it unlikely that this is a popular build to play on more than one boss in the raid, just looking at like when it was popular in Narrowbar in a similar number distinction, and just in the past. I don't think that people will really be playing it that much. I'm still going to cover it, and I'm going to cover normal Frostfire because the normal Frostfire build is what you'll be doing in Mythic Plus. You will not be Frostfire Bolt spamming in Mythic Plus. And I think it's just more likely you're going to play it for the majority of the raid bosses. So your talents look like this. It's essentially the Spellslinger talents, except without Everlasting Frost. You take Frozen Touch, because Frostfire just doesn't care about Orb at all, really. And then you're taking Thermal Conditioning. In the past, we've mostly taken Severe Temperatures. Thermal Conditioning is actually a much bigger DPS gain for Frostfire next year, and that just has to do with their tier set. The fact that it amps Frostfire Bolt's damage and gives it Ignite, right? So it's a massive increase to damage Frostfire Bolt, which was already doing quite a massive amount of damage. So yeah, and the rest of the tier set, right, is the Meteor and Frostfire burst damage increased, and those also apply Ignite, and then casting Glacial Spike casts a Pyroblast, which also applies Ignite. The thing to know about this, really, Ignite, doesn't matter, it only scales with our versatility, because none of our other stats really affect Meteor and Frostfire burst and stuff, except crit, because they fixed that. And the Pyroblast from Glacial Spike is calculated on cast. So normally, right, we do the whole Glacial Spike into Flurry thing. You do not want to do that. You actually want to go out of your way to never Glacial Spike into Flurry if you can avoid it as Frostfire, because that doesn't shatter the Pyroblast. So you're gonna you know, it's not necessary, but you could do things like flurry, naked flurry at already 5 icicles into glacial spike instead of doing a glacial spike into flurry, just so that you can shatter that power blast. That's not going to be in the rotation I show you, just because it matters, you know, not so much that people really need to be concerned about it, but it's just a little ridiculous, so I wanted to mention it. But yeah, so this is the build, and we'll also be taking thermal conditioning in the Mythic Plus build as well, just because it's so much of a single target or cleave damage increase that it doesn't really make sense to take severe temperatures, in my opinion. But anyway, let's get on to the priority. And then these are the talents for the Frostfire Bolt spam build. So you're just doing what you can to empower Frostfire Bolt, which really is just taking Deep Shatter and dropping, you know, like chain reaction and stuff for it. So nothing crazy here, pretty much the same build, just a little bit more focused on Frostbolt shattering. And we'll take a look at its priority list as well. But again, this is essentially pure single target. You know, there might be played on a couple raid fights next year, but you know, anytime you really need to take AOE talents, you're probably just going to drop this entirely. The most I could see is Fractalus and you know, maybe Lumathar, and then also maybe like the cleave fight for Soul Hunters, but I think there's almost no one that's going to try playing this build on Soul Hunters. You're just gonna play the standard build or Spellslinger. So I didn't explicitly say this for Spellslinger, I guess, but you're not going to send a flurry if you already have Winter's Chill. Kind of, I would hope that's kind of implicitly defined. For Frostfire, however, that also holds true for the standard single target, right? This is no Winter's Chill, and this is also, you know, no Winter's Chill, right? But when you start looking at a build that spams Frostbolt, suddenly there's a lot of times you're casting Frostfire Bolt into when target already has Winter's Chill. So this actually is also no Winter's Chill, but it almost never happens. And so this one is much Winter's Chill. So there will be times where you're just Frostfire Bolt Flurry, which is a bit silly. Doesn't feel very intuitive. It's mainly because you just get so many flurries. What are you gonna do? You know, you have to cast them, right? But anyway, let's look at the standard one first. So we've got very similar to Spellslinger, similar bones where you'll flurry after Glacial Spike if you have Nowhere's Chill. And I just mentioned that in a tier set discussion. This very rarely occurs because you're always going to be like flurrying here. And in fact, you know, if you really want, you could just start naked flurrying anytime you're over 3 icicles. So if you really like that about Dragonflight, that's actually a DPS gain over what I'm showing you here. But it's incredibly minor. So yeah, instead, if you're not flurrying after Glacial Spike, you're going to hold all of your flurries until you have at least 3 icicles. And then you will overcap your icicles to flurry if need be. And to give you an example of 3 icicles, because people generally get confused, if you're currently casting Frostfire Bolt and you have 2 icicles, then you should consider yourself able to flurry. Because when your Frostfire Bolt finishes, you will have 3 icicles, so you should then flurry. And if you want to min-max this a little farther, you can subtract this. You can subtract your 3 by number of Fingers of Frost, right? Because those don't consume Winter's Chill. So technically with 2 Fingers of Frost, you could flurry at 1. But you don't need to do that. That's not really necessary. Just an option. You're just going to Comet Storm into Winter's Chill. You can also send it on CD if you want. You're just going to slam Glacial Spike on CD. No consideration for Winter's Chill. But your consideration for Winter's Chill is if you have Flurry, you know, you'd use it. And then your Frozen Orb on CD. Shipping Power, you're going to, you know, toss it out if Icy Veins and Comet Storm are on CD. And then your Ice Lance with Fingers of Frost or Winter's Chill. And then your Frostfire Bolt. Pretty standard stuff. So let's go over that first before we do the Bolt spam stuff. But yeah, as you can see, this is for Mythic Plus single target or Raid without Deep Shatter. Standard opener. If you don't have Lust, I'd delay Shifting Power a little bit so you can fit your Glacial Spike into this Winter's Chill. I don't quite get a good showcase of it here, but if you do get an empowered Frostfire Bolt, you would cast Flurry after it if you don't have Winter's Chill. You can see there's a little bit of lag on the PTR. So but yeah, it's pretty standard stuff. You just a lot of Frostfire bolts, and then you just see, oh, am I casting Frostfire bolt and add 2 icicles? Then I press flurry, and that's just normal. Of the 3 single target rotations I show you, this is definitely the easiest one to transition to from where we are currently, because you won't be worried about cold front as Spellslinger, so kind of annoying. Holding the Comet Storm for Winter's Chill and my shifting power for my Comet Storm CD. But yeah, you just could send your Glacial Spike. And then I have the priority for Boltspam down here, which is pretty similar to the standard one, except we just don't ever cast Frozen Orb, and you will munch Winter's Chill whenever you're casting Frostfire Bolt and Flurry with more than 3 icicles. So yeah, branch that. And then for Ice Lance, it's heavily restricted. You're only ever doing it when you have 2 Winter's Chill, or if you have Fingers Frost and 0 icicles. The 2 Winter's Chill condition, if you have Fingers Frost, technically means you could Ice Lance a couple times in a row. But most times that's not gonna be too true, because you're gonna Ice Lance like once, get to Glacial Spike, and then either Ice Lance with Fingers Frost or not. But anyway, and again, this is only for raid with Deep Shatter. So here's the opener here. Now we're going to ignore Frozen Orb because you don't press this Bolt Spam. And again, this tends to be like overhyped whenever it comes out. I do not think you are going to play this, aside from maybe Fractalus, but we'll see. Use my Fingers of Frost once after my Glacial Spike, and I shouldn't have done 2 Frostfire Bolts there. It should have been a Flurry after the first instant Frostfire Bolt. Didn't react to my Splendid Cold in time, so Ice Lance at 2 Winter's Chill, which is allowed. Here we're going to Glacial Spike into an Ice Lance because we have Fingers Frost. Now I should be looking at Shifting Power. Ideally I would have done it either before or after I used that Comet Storm, because of the CDR stuff. CDR was just a little bit delayed, so Ice Lance after this because I have Fingers Frost and 0 icicles. But yeah, it's just consistency stuff. I'm not sure if I ever get to the point where I actually use multiple Ice Lances after or at 2 Winter's Chill. Probably not, because I'm consistently using it at 3 icicles. So like here, just straight into Glacial Spike. Then you still cast Glacial Spike on CD, but I got a Flurry proc, so use that. Oh yeah, there you go. There's all the Ice Lances, because the 2 Winter's Chill. Alright, so this is what the AoE kind of looks like against each other. You have non-DC Frostfire at the bottom, but 11% worse than the top. That's pretty significant. So I would generally not recommend playing non-DC Frostfire unless you're doing under 10 keys consistently, just because then Frostfire has enough burst and you don't want DC there anyway. Otherwise, Spellslinger looking kind of strong, but we'll see how that plays out. I have a feeling that most people are going to be preferring potentially DC Frostfire for Mythic Plus. And for its single target, this is kind of like the single target breakdown as well. So no GS with Death Chill for Spellslingers, the worst single target, obviously. And then, Spellslinger kind of does well, and DC Frostfire also does really well. So, yeah. But we have quite a few Mythic Plus builds. The Frostfire one's very standard, right? It's DC versus Chain Reaction for Frostfire. For Spellslinger, because we have to take Cold Front, it actually opens up a lot of build variety, because in order to keep everything we really want, we have to sacrifice something, right? To keep DC, we have to sacrifice Comet Storm, or GS, or we could not do that and keep Glacial Assault and stuff. So I'll show you those builds now. So starting with the Node.js build, this build is by far the weakest in single target. It does have the highest AOE, but it's 0.7% above a no Common Storm Spellslinger build, so it's just a good option. If you want to play no Glacial Spike, it's kind of the closest it's really been this expansion. And for all of the Spellslinger builds, dropping Frozen Touch for Frostbite is going to be a pretty solid DPS increase in freezable AoE. But that comes with the downsides of the random freezes and everything, so it's not really everyone's cup of tea. And on some dungeons, it's probably not gonna be the best. Like Dawnbreaker, there's really not that much value from it. But yeah. And if you are dropping Glacial Spike, make sure you take Signature Spell off and replace it with Shifting Shards, which gives you some more splinters. And Signature Spell, doesn't work without Glacial Spike. So this is the no Common Storm build. Frostfire very much doesn't really like casting Common Storm, so you don't really even really get anything of value here. You're like taking one Splintering Cold. So it's pretty terrible, to be honest. But this is actually numerically one of the better builds, so this is pretty solid to take as well. And then we have just the standard Common Storm no DC build. This is the only build for Spellslinger that doesn't play Death Chill, and it still takes Common Storm and Glacial Assault. So yeah, this is a good talent build if you don't want to play Death Chill, but you do want to play for Spellslinger. You can't really avoid Death Chill for the other builds, and for Frostfire, just it's so too strong. But yeah. And then for Frostfire here, this is literally exactly what we've been running this entire expansion, right? So this is the non-DC build, this is the DC build. Literally 1-to-1 for this expansion. The only difference is we're taking thermal conditioning in both these, where we used to take severe temperatures. Thermal conditioning is just massive value in single target for Frostfire next year. And it's pretty solid if you have Death Chill as well. So yeah, let's get going for Spellslinger Priority. So Spellslinger's got a lot of lines, right? It's got 11. It's got 11 lines here. But it's nothing new really. So you're gonna kind of cold. Technically you really only care about Frozen Orb, so if you like just cast Frozen Orb, or if it is like greater than 30 seconds on CD, I went ahead and tossed your Comet Storm into the opener here, because this is kind of a line built around not the opener. So I would still Comet Storm in the opener, just get it on CD, because there's no reason not to really. But yeah, and then you're gonna spend flurries after Frostbolts or Glacial Spikes. You're not going to munch Winter's Chill here. You're gonna only do it if the target doesn't already have Winter's Chill. You're gonna flurry a target without Winter's Chill if your Cold Front is ready, because we need to send our Frozen Orb. We don't want to munch Winter's Chill ideally. Then you're just gonna spam Frozen Orb, you're spam Blizzard, you're just gonna Counter Storm. If you have Glacial Assault talented, which if you look at the Spellslinger builds, the DC build with Comet Storm has it, the non-Comet Storm build does not have it, and also doesn't even have Comet Storm, and then the non-DC build also has Glacial Assault. So for those builds, you're just going to cast Comet Storm on CD in AoE. And then we actually really want to Ice Lance with 2 Fingers of Frost, even over using Glacial Spike, even if we can shatter Glacial Spike, just because with Splinters and Cold Flint stacks, we really want to be using those Fingers of Frost. So yeah, prior your Ice Lance 2 Fingers of Frost. Then you're going to stack your Death Chill up to 9 below both Ice Lance with 2 Fingers of Frost and Glacial Spikes. That's a bit weird, but it's honestly probably a worse position. Of all the things for Death Chill to do, it being awkwardly in the middle of your non-AoE rotation is not good. It being, you spamming it 4 times at the start of your opener is pretty bad as well. But I think it's easier to manage than this, where it's in the middle of your like filler priority. So then you just Ice Lance, finish Frost, Winter's Chill, and use cast Frostbolt. So doing a hybrid build so I can showcase all the abilities for you. Use my Ice Lance at 2 Fingers Frost before doing my Frostbolt. Use Winter's Chill or Flurry after I consume the Winter's Chill from Kind of Cold. Do my 2 Fingers Frost thing and Glacial Spike before I go back to stacking my Death Chill. Now I'm at 9, so I'm good. This would feel good to Shifting Power here, but I want to wait until I'm out of Icy Veins. So we'll flurry after its Frostbolt, get some Moist Chill going. Ideally, I would have, had a flurry or something to proc this Cold Front earlier, because I was just kind of sitting on that for a second. But now I'm out of Icy Veins, I can Shifting Power. I'd want to use my 2 Fingers Frost, even though I'm at 5 Icicles. But yeah, and then I didn't mention it, but you would technically just Shifting Power out of Icy Veins when it's on CD. But anyway, for Frostfire, for its AOE Prio, it's actually even longer because you get some excess conditions that you don't have in single target and everything. So pretty standard, right? Kind of cold, right after Count Storm. Both this and Spellslinger's cone requirements have remained about the same this expansion. Just flurry after Glacial Spike. Ideally, you would flurry from like 4 to 5 or something instead of this, but whatever. Frozen Orb, Blizzard, and then you're gonna stack Death Shield to 12. This one's actually at high priority, so you don't really need to worry about the weird filler stuff that Spellslinger does. And then you Ice Lance with 2 excess fire. Count Storm's ready. And then you're just gonna Count Storm. If you're not gonna use Cone of Cold in 12 seconds, send Glacial Spike when you can. Your like highest filler spell aside from Glacial Spike is gonna be Flurry, and that's just whenever you have excess frost, you want to be firing that off. And then Shifting Power, when Icy Veins, Count Storm, Blizzard on CD, and you use Frostfire Bolt with Frostfire Empowerment and no excess fire. This is fine to use into Winter's Chill and everything. Same as this tier. And then you just Ice Lance with Fingers Frost, Winter's Chill, and then the last one's Frostfire Bolt. My bad. And then you have quite literally the same opener, right? Where you Ice Veins and Blizzard and Orb, and then you Comet Storm into Cone of Gold, into Orb, Refresh Blizzard, and Comet Storm. Right. Technically, I guess you would delay this, so you'll stack DC to 12, unlike Spellslinger. So, bit of the annoying part, but that's right. And this normally means, you're probably going to need to Ice Lance here. Ice Lance at 2 excess fire. Because Comet Storm, of course, generates excess fire, and excess fire does the whole Frostfire burst damage thing, which is on our tier set, which I'm not spec Frostfire right now, but does a lot of damage. So we don't want to overcap those, if possible. So yeah, let's showcase that. So for Frostfire, it's a little bit easier. We just stack DC on opener, right? But I got 2 excess fire or excess Frostfire Bolt, whatever. So I have to Ice Lance once before my first Comet Storm, and then once again before my second Comet Storm. So I'm not overcapping my excess fire. Normally you would tap target those excess flurries I just did, but I don't have that macro on PTR, so Shifting Power in Icy Veins because I don't have the Forge Master's Trinket. I probably should have shattered that Glacial Spike instead of casting the Frozen Orb, but it's alright. Here I want to tap some more flurries for my excess frost. They just never go away. It's ridiculous. Hold that Comet Storm because my Cone of Cold's in less than 12 seconds. Then we make sure it's Comet Storm right into Cone of Cold in that order. Flurry for my excess frost before I consume more of my excess fire. And we're going to do that again, but I just run out of flurries. So now I have Frostfire Bolt for excess fire. And then we're going to flurry for Glacial Spike and excess frost. But see, I can't flurry now because I don't have a flurry. So you can ignore that Weakura. So now we're on to gear, and gear-wise, they're a little bit different. The mastery changes for 0.2 did not very much for Frostfire, but did quite a lot for Spellslinger. And what I'm going to show you is not a BIS list. You can and should equip different gear from this, and most likely also different gear in your max eye level profile than what this has. Okay? Sim your character. Jesus. Anyway. Spellslinger goes for a lot of like haste mastery, and it likes to do double passive. This trinket from Fractalus and this one's from M+. These are better than the other trinkets, but you should sim it either way, and that might change by the time you see this video. But yeah, this is a much better passive than like Sackbrood currently, unless you're doing like I think an over 5-minute fight, then Sackbrood takes over, something like that. So yeah, it's kind of similar to like a Kazan situation. But yeah, you're loving mastery as Spellslinger. And you just take it, some crit, some haste, maybe a little bit of verse, but you don't go your way for verse. Then when you look at Frostfire is big into its verse still. It wants shit ton verse, not that much mastery, so bunch of crit haste, bunch of verse, and then it actually uses an on use, this one from Raid. This is a very, 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 very strong on use. And if you have it, you should not cast Shifting Power in Icy Veins. Spellslinger already doesn't do that, but Frostfire does. But with this trinket specifically, you wouldn't. In part because it better aligns your Icy Veins with this trinket, and then also because when it's up, you just don't want to, use Shifting Power because it's a trash spell. And then you use this passive's also just really strong, but there's a number of replacements for this passive. But yeah, essentially same old for Frostfire, and Spellslinger's all kind of haste first, a little bit of crit. This is different from this tier, and also unfortunately rather different from Arcane. Arcane got its mastery buffed pretty substantially. So Frostfire, not in the best situation. It kind of shares a little bit of stats with with like Sun Fury Fire, but that's A, not looking like a great spec next tier, and B, you still need to change some jewelry there. So yeah, minorly unfortunate that they said they would pay attention to our mastery and didn't do anything after that, when the problem always was Frostfire and never was Spellslinger, and they just overbuffed it for Spellslinger. But anyway, yeah, I'm not gonna have any Flurry now weak aura for this tier, just because we don't have any kind of unintuitive flurrying really. I would recommend like a mouse over macro for Flurry. Like there's like cast at target or mouse over if mouse over, and that's a good macro to have for Flurry. I don't use it right now, which is kind of why I was just flurrying the same target a lot of times in the videos you just watched, but I will be using that on live probably a little bit. I think this is going to be great tier for Frost. I think Arcane's still going to be a bit of more meta, just based on M+ attitude and what the raid mechanics actually look like. But I think it's going to be much more similar to Narrowbar, I guess, where playing Frost was certainly possible, right? I played Frost like on our first Brood and Nerubian Court or Silken Court kill, and that was totally valid. And then I decided to just go Arcane for some of the other bosses, though Frost would have worked totally fine as well for Onstrek if you didn't really need some of the stuff Arcane provided. Anyway, getting ahead of yourselves. I just think this is gonna be a good tier. If you want to play Frost, you can certainly play Frost, and it's got a decent amount of build variety for Spellslinger at least. Although I think Spellslinger is going to perform a little bit worse than Frostfire in general. Nothing new on the weak aura side. If anything pops up, I'll let you know. Obviously, there's the Instant Winter's Chill weak aura, which if you don't have, I very highly recommend. And I can put a link to that if people want it. But yeah, that's about it. So if anything changes, I'll update the pinned comment. But as of now, we're looking a little bit stable. So yeah, I hope you all have a good tier, and come ask me any questions or drop them in the Mage Discord. So goodbye.